Shalom. My name is Rabbi Jackson. I'm with Beit Tikkun, House of Healing and Repair here in Hazelwood, Missouri. And I wanted to take a little time to talk about and address the announcement that Pastor Staley made last night. In the announcement, I'm sure many of you that were watching heard that he is going to be going away from the direction of the label, the Hebrew Roots movement. And instead, the Father has led him by the Ruach HaKodesh to go with the label Christian Roots, returning back to the Spirit and the Torah. I've received several inboxes asking me what I thought or what was going on with Pastor Staley, and my response to that is I can't speak for Pastor Staley. Me and him are very, very close. We are in one accord, but I can't speak for him. I did want to address the direction that the Father has led me to also take my congregation in, and the revelation that he's been dealing with me about for some time now. This past year, I really have been taking an introspective look at our movement, at the Hebrew Roots movement, and by and large, there are people in our movement who love the Lord, who love His Torah, and who operate under the guise of love. So I wanted to say that before I got into the meat of this video, because I'm not addressing those people. But the movement by and large, in my opinion, and again this is just my opinion, does not reflect Messiah. We have just as much backbiting, we have just as much strife, just as much division as any other movement. Even the very church that we oftentimes, in my opinion, bash. And so I really have been seeking the Father about what direction He would like for me to take my congregation in. And He brought me a revelation several weeks ago. It's right in line with what Pastor Staley is also doing. He began to speak with me about the Ark of the Covenant. And he asked me by his Spirit, what was the Ark made of and where did they get the design? Which is a pretty easy question. For any Bible scholar out there, you will know that the Ark of the Covenant was made of shittim wood and gold, and it was gotten from a pattern of one that already existed in heaven. And so the Ruach began to speak to me by his, and asked me, well, is the one in heaven made of shittim wood and gold? And the answer to which I had to say no, because the shittim wood and gold of the one here on earth are corrupted elements. It's from a corrupt planet. The one in heaven, there is no corruption in heaven. And so the Father began to reveal a really heavy revelation to me that in actuality there are two Torahs. Now before I get a mass rebuttal, allow me to flesh out the thought and you'll understand where I'm going. Many of us come into this movement through an understanding that the Torah of Moses is still valid, and we apply that Torah to our lifestyles as best we can in the dispersion. Of course, there are some laws that we cannot keep simply because we're not in the land. There's no temple standing, and we're keeping these Torah laws for sanctification. It's not for salvation, it's for sanctification. And I still agree with that. I still uphold those truths. But what the Father showed me through the example that I just used of the Ark of the Covenant is that the Ark of the Covenant here on earth is a shadow of the one that exists in perfection. And that at the very beginning of the Bible, heaven and earth were one place. And that covenant that God had with mankind is the covenant that we are all trying to get back to. He's shown me that the Hebrew Roots movement is not the goal, but merely the vehicle to the goal. And what he showed me also is that the Torah of Moses is not an eternal Torah. Now I did say that, and I want to back that up with several scriptures and some other source texts that I've been studying. Yeshua in Matthew 5:17 says the following. He says, "Do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For assuredly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle by no means will pass from the law till all is fulfilled. And I want to just stop and take a look at verse 18. He says, for surely I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or tittle will by no means pass from the law. In other words, the law of Moses will endure as long as physical existence as we know it here on earth right now exists. In other words, the corruption. I believe that the law of Moses points us and is the doorway, it is the beginning. It is a Torah that deals with earthly matters. In other words, for example, the law, thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not steal exists because we have thieves on earth. But what about when we get into glory? What about when we get into the kingdom? What about when we get into the new heavens and new earth where there are no thieves? Then what? And so I believe what Messiah here is saying is that when he comes, he will bring with him a new Torah. Now this was also one of the thoughts in rabbinical Judaism within the first century, that when the Messiah came, that he would bring about a new Torah. And I'm going to read from some other sources here to kind of shore this deal up. One of the sources that I used here is a new book by Rabbi Yitzhak Shapira called Return of the Kosher Pig. In this book, he writes the following. He says, so far in the first two arguments in favor of the divine Messiah, we established an important theme about the Messiah's ranking, authority, sometimes called midot, and purpose. As I carefully examined many rabbinic sources over an extended time, it became clear to me that the authority of the Messiah does not stop with him sitting on a heavenly throne and acting as a judge over Israel and the nation, but goes much further. In this chapter, we will review the role of the Messiah as we examine his role as the Baal Torah, or the owner of the Torah. One of the main attributes of the Messiah is that he will be the true Baal Torah, or in English, the rightful owner of the Torah. The sages declare the Torah that a man acquires in this world is foolishness in comparison to the Torah of the Messiah. In order to further understand the sages' claims about the Torah of the Messiah, it is important to understand the meaning of the word hevel, or foolishness, in the reference. In Ecclesiastes Rabbah, Rabbi Hezekiah, in the name of Rabbi Shimon bar Zavdi, explains that the Torah of men is called hevel, or foolishness, because it is not eternal. However, in the future, Torah will be in the hearts of Israel, and they will never forget it. There will be no hevel, because the new Torah will be eternal, as Ecclesiastes Rabbah explains in connection with Jeremiah 31. The sages go on to declare that any tranquility that a man experiences in this world is hevel, or foolishness, in comparison to the tranquility of the world to come. All the Torah that a man learns in this world is foolishness compared to the Torah of the world to come, because in this world a man studies and forgets. But the Torah of Mashiach will be remembered forever. The sages point out that the Messiah will bring an eternal Torah that will never be forgotten by people. Unlike the Torah that we now have, once again it is difficult to see the possibility of a mere human living a finite number of years giving an eternal Torah. Rabbi Yehoshua Weitzman, the head of Yeshivat Ma'alot Yaakov, adds another explanation. What makes the difference between our Torah today and the Torah of the Messiah? The forgetfulness of the Torah is not the reason for the difference between our Torah and the Torah of the Messiah, but it is rather the sign of the difference. The Torah of this world is dressed in matters concerning this world, but the Torah of the Messiah is filled with heavenly ideas. Rabbi Weitzman concludes, what value is there to the Torah that we study today, since it is considered foolishness? Does it reduce its importance? This is not the case. Our sages explain to us that we resemble a baby who studies Torah in the womb of his mother, and when he is born, he forgets the Torah. Was the value of the first Torah lost? There is still great value to the first Torah. When we, the born baby, identify the new Torah, it won't be new in our eyes as we will remember our mother's words, and the words will integrate to our world since we heard them before. Our responsibility in this world is to study the Torah in such a way that we will be ready to receive the Torah of the Messiah. So this is just one of the sources that the Lord revealed this revelation to me. Now, Messiah himself, over in John 13, 31 through 34, says the following. He says, "So when he had gone out, Yeshua said, 'Now the Son of Man is glorified, and Yahweh is glorified in him. If Yahweh is glorified in him, Yahweh will also glorify him in himself, and glorify him immediately. Little children, I shall be with you a little while longer. You will seek me, and as I said to the Jews, where I am going, you cannot come. So now I say to you, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another.'" Now, in contrast with the Torah of Moses, the law of Moses states we should love our neighbor as ourselves. And I've heard many people say that this commandment that Messiah gave was actually an expounding upon that already existent commandment. I beg to differ with that, because the Messiah himself says here that he is giving us a new commandment. And this commandment is not found within the Torah of Moses. So where did he get it from? My contention is that he got this commandment from his very own Torah. You see, in the beginning of time, heaven and earth were one place. And through the fall of man, through the fall of Adam, they separated. And so you had heaven and earth. And I believe that there is a Torah that governs heaven, just as there is a Torah that governs earth. And the very Torah that governs heaven is none other than the Torah of the Messiah. I believe that we all must come to the Messiah by faith, and that the Torah of Moses is still valid and binding, since we simply live in a corrupted world. Heavens and earth have not passed away as of yet. But I believe by the blood of the Messiah and through his Spirit, through his Ruach, we are able to grab hold of the heavenly Torah. I believe that when this occurs is when we see the very power of God manifested on earth. As we study the law of Moses and we are earth, and we reach up and we grab a hold to the piece of heaven, and we reach up and we grab a hold to that heavenly Torah, and we become one with Messiah, one with his Torah, then his power is able to flow through us, and we are able to walk as the disciples walked. This is further proved out to me by the fact that the disciples themselves would have been schooled and brought up learning the Torah of Moses. However, they do not begin to walk in great power until Messiah Yeshua comes on the scene and calls them. Again, there's tons and tons of evidence of this. The other episode that I want to point out is that prior to the children of Israel going into the promised land within the Torah, we read that Moses does not go in. And what the Father showed me by his Spirit is that the law of Moses will not get you into the promised land. It will bring you up to it, but it will not get you in. It is only by Yahashua, or Joshua, who represents Yeshua, that the children of Israel are able to be led into the land. And that generation that came out of Egypt with the law of Moses, with Moshe, that did not have faith, died in the wilderness. When we take a look at that group of people, I see a similar parallel within our own movement. That group of people was very bitter. That group of people was very self-motivated. That group of people knew the acts of God, but they did not know him as Moses knew him. And even Joshua, who goes into the promised land, has to start out under Moses. However, it is him that leads them into the promised land. I believe that Revelation 12:17 and Revelation 14:12, both verses that refer to a saint as he who keeps the commandments of God and the testimony of Yeshua, is essentially saying that a true believer, as Messiah himself pointed out, will worship him in spirit and in truth. A true believer will have the testimony of Yeshua, which I believe is his Torah, the heavenly Torah, the Torah of the Mashiach, and keep the commandments of Yahweh, which I believe are the laws of Moses. With all that being said, I also would like to point out that this movement has become so toxic by and large that it doesn't want to even associate with the term Christian. Although the term Hebrew roots isn't found within the scriptures. And as much as we don't want to hear it, the early church, there is scripture that says that at some point they were referred to as Christians. Now I understand that there is a lot of doctrine that has come down the pike within modern Christianity that has convoluted that. We have thousands of denominations and doctrines. I am not here saying that we are to go back into that or to go into that which we know to violate God's word when it comes to the doctrine and dogma of men. What I am saying is that within our movement we have the very same issues that we so vehemently oppose within traditional dogma, within traditional church dogma. We have just as many splits, just as many denominations, if you will, even though they're not named as such. I mean, you have groups out there that are sacred namers. You got groups out there that are only going by one calendar and they won't associate with other groups. You have groups out there, you have groups that have renounced Yeshua altogether and went into orthodoxy. So we have just as many issues as the church has. We simply, in my opinion, don't spend a whole lot of time addressing those issues. And so again, I believe that the Hebrew Roots movement is not the goal. I do believe it is the vehicle that Yahweh is using, but where he has brought me to in my congregation is the same place that he's brought Jim Staley. In that going forward, I'm going to be also peeling away from the Hebrew Roots label, if you will, because it's not the final goal. The final goal is in actuality the one new man. And as I was speaking with the brother, it was just revelation to him. And what he stated is that the one new man is the true body of Messiah. Yeshua himself says that we worship him in spirit and in truth. This movement has a lot of knowledge. It doesn't, in my opinion, have a lot of spirit. And it doesn't operate by and large as a movement filled with mercy and grace as much as it does knowledge. Again, I want to say that this is not a broad brush label. There are ministries out there that I am aware of within our movement that love Yahweh. There are teachers in our movement that I am aware of that love Yahweh. This is the direction that the Ruach is taking me, and I know that this is also the direction that it is taking Jim Staley. With that being said, we will still teach Hebraically. It doesn't mean that we are headed back into we're just gonna jettison the festivals and jettison the Torah of Moses. Lord forbid. What we are saying is that we want to operate under the Spirit along with the truth. We don't want to compromise Yahweh's word. We don't want to operate in pride. We don't want to operate in knowledge that puffs up, but rather love that builds up. And so my goal for Beit Tikkun, the House of Healing here in Hazelwood, Missouri, is to bring about healing within the body of Messiah, to lead them in the direction that the Messiah told us to go, which is to become the one new man, which is to be conformed to his image. And so again, my prayer for all that see this video is that they gain an understanding as to where our hearts are, why our hearts have been brought to this place, and that we are moving forward in unity. I do love Pastor for Truth. I love Pastor Staley. I wholeheartedly support his ministry and what the Father is doing with him. If you have any questions and concerns in regards to me and our ministry, feel free to reach out to us at Beit Tikkun on Facebook. Again, if you have questions in regards to Pastor Staley, I would appreciate it greatly if you would reach out directly to Pastor for Truth. I know that his staff is wonderful. He is wonderful, and he would certainly be willing to address or answer any questions that you may have. Shalom, shalom, and God bless.